Black maid caught breastfeeding billionaire's baby. What the family does next shocks everyone. She's just the maid. Keep her away from the child's wing. The words sliced through the air like shattered glass. Cold, sharp, painful. The mansion door creaked open, muffled by the light drizzle falling over the San Francisco hills that winter morning. Sienna James, 32, with warm medium brown skin and loose curls resting over her shoulders, stepped inside quietly, clutching her faded handbag and a broken umbrella. Her light green uniform with white trim was still dry, but her eyes already carried the dampness of years no one had seen. The Whitman family's entrance hall was grand, all in white marble with sweeping spiral staircases. A faint scent of artificial flowers lingered in the air, contrasting with the coldness of a place where everything seemed meticulously polished and inhumanly empty. A blonde staff member, wearing a name badge and holding herself with superiority, greeted her without meeting her eyes. "Your locker's downstairs, next to the laundry machines. Just don't touch the antique furniture. And never, ever go up to the second floor unless you're called. Mrs. Eleanor doesn't tolerate surprises." Sienna only nodded, silent but steady. As she made her way down to the basement, a sound echoed along the marble staircase. A high-pitched, desperate baby's cry, the kind of cry that cuts through walls. That phrased the nerves. That tears at the chest of any woman who has ever carried a child. She stopped, just for a second. Her eyes drifted upward as if they could reach that sound. But the other employee, impatient, called out, "I said cleaning starts in the garage." Wing. Hours later, her hands raw from soap and her knees marked by the polished floor, Sienna worked silently through the empty hallways of the ground floor. The mansion felt more like a luxury hospital than a home. Everything clinical. No photos, no voices. Just the crying, Oliver, an 8-month-old baby, son of the powerful Grant Whitman, CEO of one of Silicon Valley's largest biotech companies. Motherless since birth, inconsolable ever since. "We've gone through 5 nannies this month," one of the gardeners muttered outside the window. "They say the boy won't take a bottle. Won't be held. Nothing. Seems cursed." Sienna kept scrubbing, but her soul wasn't cleaning the floor. She listened. She felt. She carried within her a milk no one else knew existed. She carried grief and life at the same time. From the top of the stairs, Eleanor Whitman, 62, with silver hair and a stone-like face, watched everything with disdain. "Is this the new one?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then listen closely. She's just the maid. Keep her away from the child's wing." From the hallway, Sienna heard every word. She didn't need to see the matriarch's face. The pain of prejudice doesn't need a face to hurt. But at that exact moment, a sharper cry tore through the silence. Oliver was crying as if something were wrong, different, stronger, as if the world were collapsing inside a crib. Sienna dropped the bucket. Her heart pounded. She took a step toward the staircase, then another. But before she could decide what to do, a door swung open violently. A security guard appeared. "You're not allowed to be here." She froze. But the crying upstairs wouldn't stop. The rain over San Francisco grew heavier as the mansion's clock read 2:47 a.m. The house, though quiet, felt tense, suffocated by Oliver's piercing wails, carrying through walls like a sorrow trapped in time. From the basement, between the hum of the boiler and the buzz of the old refrigerator, Sienna James, still in her uniform, tried to rest her feet, damp in their socks. But the crying, it was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just noise. It was the desperation of a baby who didn't know how to ask for help with words. She climbed the steps slowly, as if each one defied the house's rules. Her heart beat to the rhythm of something forbidden. Upstairs, an unexpected scene was unfolding in the main wing's hallway. The night nanny, blonde, young, with a crooked name tag and tired eyes, was coming down the stairs in tears, clutching her bag to her chest. I can't take it anymore. He won't sleep, won't feed, won't let me breathe. I'm sorry, but I wasn't hired for this. A security guard tried to stop her. Wait, missus. Eleanor hasn't. She can hire someone else. I'm not going back in that room. There's something strange about that baby. And she was gone, out the gate, into the rain. Sienna watched from the shadows of the hallway, alone, invisible. But something inside her, ancient, instinctive, began to stir. She turned toward the stairs and looked up. The crying still tore through the air. But now, there was more pain than sound. She climbed, step by step, without being called, without permission. But with her heart guiding her feet, the golden doorknob was cold. She hesitated for a moment. Then she turned it. The room was huge, with heavy curtains, white furniture, and a high-tech crib in the center, surrounded by lights and screens. But in the middle of all that sophistication, there was a baby shaking from crying so hard. Oliver's face was red, his eyes shut tight, his tiny arms stiff as if fighting against his own body. The bottle lay on the floor, untouched. The baby. Monitor beeped pointlessly. A luxury room where no gesture of care seemed to work. Sienna stepped inside. Calmly. Hey, little one. Her voice was almost a whisper, but it carried all the pain of a mother who had lost a child and all the tenderness of someone who still believes in love. I'm here. You don't need to cry anymore. She reached out her arms. The baby hesitated. His cries came in short, uneven bursts, but then something changed. Oliver opened his eyes. He saw this black woman with loose curls, warm skin, a gentle face, and trembling hands, and he stopped crying. Sienna froze. The baby blinked as if he recognized her from somewhere the soul understands before the body does. She stepped closer, wrapped him in a soft cotton blanket, touched his cold skin, and he nestled into her. In her arms, the crying dissolved. His tiny eyes closed. For the first time in weeks, he slept. A red light blinked in the corner of the ceiling. Security camera. Recording everything. The black maid, the white baby. United by something no resume or contract could explain. Sienna sat down in the white armchair. She took a deep breath, gently stroked Oliver's fine hair, and cried silently. Outside the room, a shadow stood watching through the crack of the half-open door. Eleanor. Her eyes narrowed. Her pale face frozen in disbelief. Her lips trembling, not from emotion, but from control being broken. The silence of that early morning felt sacred. Sienna still sat in the white armchair, the baby asleep on her chest. Oliver's room, so cold and impersonal before, now held the warmth of a womb. She rocked him slowly with precise, gentle movements, as if time had turned back and, for a brief instant, she had her own child back in her arms. The sound of his breathing, light and steady, was a symphony she hadn't heard since the day she lost everything. But the peace didn't last long. The next morning, the family pediatrician was called urgently. Eleanor, worried about the unrest of recent weeks, demanded tests and detailed reports. The baby was losing weight, quickly. He's refusing all formula, said the doctor, a gray-haired man with a tense expression. If this continues, we'll have to consider extreme measures. His body is rejecting everything. It's as if He knows he's being forced. Eleanor narrowed her eyes, annoyed. This is unacceptable. We've tried 4 different formula brands. The doctor hesitated before speaking. There is an alternative, but it's delicate. Human breast milk would be the best option. It's what he needs right now, natural, immediate. Grant, who had been silent by the window until then, turned slowly. And how are we supposed to get that? Hire a donor? That would take days. My son needs help now. The doctor said nothing. That's when Sienna, quietly cleaning the edge of the room, lowered her eyes, but couldn't stay silent. Mr. Grant. Everyone turned. She took a deep breath, her hands sweating. Her voice came out shaky, but firm. I can help. If you'll allow me. Eleanor frowned. Help how? Sienna swallowed hard. Her heart felt like it was beating in her throat. I still produce milk. Silence. The revelation fell like thunder on a dry day. After I lost my son, 10 months ago, my body didn't stop. I'd never told anyone. I didn't even know if it was right. Grant looked stunned. The doctor regarded her with restrained empathy, but Eleanor reacted first. Her voice cut through the air. You're suggesting what? That my grandson feed from a staff member's body? I'm suggesting that he live, Sienna replied, without blinking. That's all. That night, with Grant's reluctant approval and the mansion's heavy, unspoken silence, Sienna entered Oliver's room once again. The baby monitor was off. The security cameras too, by his order. She sat in the same white armchair, wrapped, Oliver in thin blankets with the utmost care. He cried, weak and exhausted. But when he smelled the milk, something in him settled. Sienna lowered her blouse slowly, silently. He nursed, for the first time with hunger, for the first time with peace. She cried, silently, as if asking for forgiveness and giving thanks all at once. It was too intimate to be seen, too sacred to be judged. You're not to blame for anything, my love, she whispered, and neither am I. The next morning, everything collapsed. One of the oldest housemaids, Angela, entered without knocking and saw Sienna leaving the room with Oliver still in her arms. Her eyes widened in shock and disgust. My God, what did you do? Sienna, trying to explain, stammered. You nursed him? Angela's eyes went wide. Without official permission? That's a crime. Angela ran off. The gossip reached Eleanor before 9 a.m. The matriarch came down with her silk robe billowing and her eyes blazing. This has gone far beyond the limits, she shouted, standing before the entire staff gathered in the foyer. She is to be fired, right now. Sienna stood still, holding her bag. The baby, in the arms of a newly hired nanny, cried like before, as if being torn away from his own shelter. I only wanted to help him, Sienna said, steady but with tears in her eyes. I asked for nothing. I only wanted him to live. And you crossed every professional boundary. Eleanor pointed at her. You are dismissed. And do not set foot in this house again. The door was opened. A security guard waited. Sienna took a deep breath. Before leaving, she looked at Grant. He remained still, silent, but Oliver was crying as if the world had been turned upside down. The black car with tinted windows had barely left the front of the mansion when a notification lit up the screen of Grant Whitman's phone. In bold letters, urgent. Maid breastfeeds billionaire's baby without permission. Exclusive video. He frowned, opened it, and there it was, the grainy image from the security camera leaked by someone on the staff. Sienna, sitting in the white armchair, the baby in her arms, calm, nursing at her breast with a piece the whole house hadn't known in months. The video was under 2 minutes long, but the impact was immediate. In less than an hour, Sienna James's name was trending. Celebrity gossip sites, conservative forums, anonymous profiles, and influencers spoke as if they knew the whole story. Immoral, disrespectful. She crossed into a space that wasn't hers. This is emotional abuse. And on the other side of the digital trench, Black women, single mothers, healthcare professionals, activists, all defending her. She saved that baby. That's real affection, not abuse. You're upset about her skin color, not her actions. If it had been a white nurse, they'd call it a miracle. The country was split. The scandal wasn't just about breastfeeding. It was about race, power, motherhood, and silencing. Inside the mansion, Eleanor was yelling at the family's lawyers over the phone. Control this chaos. I want that video taken down immediately. And find out who leaked it. She paced back and forth in the library, her hands trembling. But what irritated her most was Grant's silence. Aren't you going to say anything? She shot at him. She exposed our home to the whole world. Do you want the Whitman family's reputation tarnished by a cleaning woman? Grant stood motionless, staring at the open laptop on the desk. On the screen, a frozen image. Oliver sleeping. In Sienna's arms, the only time he hadn't been in distress. Do you see how he looks? He finally said, without taking his eyes off the screen. Sleeping. Peacefully. Like never before. Eleanor scoffed. You're emotionally involved. That's dangerous. He turned to her. His eyes looked different, less cold, more human. Maybe what's dangerous, Mother, is continuing to pretend that money and titles make a family. She stared at him for a moment, no reply. Meanwhile, in the staff quarters, Sienna was trying to make sense of the chaos outside. She had already been dismissed. Her belongings were in the hallway, but now she was being judged by the entire country. She turned on her old phone, the one she barely used, 100 messages, 30 missed calls, notifications popping up on the screen like bombs. Who gave you the right to do this to another woman's child? Said one anonymous text. You're the hope we need, said another. She turned it off, sat on the edge of the bed, covered her face with her hands, and, for the first time since her own child's funeral, she screamed. A raw cry, hot, unfiltered, from someone who had carried the whole world on her back, and was now watching it collapse. She wasn't sorry, but she was tired, so tired of proving her love was worthy. The next morning, a news van stopped discreetly in front of the mansion. 2 journalists got out, asking for the woman who defied the limits of modern motherhood. They were not allowed in, but the spark had already been lit. In the quiet of his office, Grant took a deep breath, closed the laptop, picked up the phone. Hello? I need to speak to her, now. The call was made, and Grant's voice, usually firm and calculated like someone used to commanding rooms full of shareholders, came out lower than usual. There was a contained crack in it, a new weight. I want to know everything about her, who Sienna James is, where she was born, where she worked, what she lost. On the other end, the legal assistant, a man used to handling corporate scandals and backroom power deals, hesitated for the first time in years. Are you sure, sir? This could open doors that are hard to close. Grant stared at his own reflection in the dark glass of the window. Open them. In the following hours, emails arrived one after another. Scanned folders, documents hidden under expired contracts, internal reports marked with old confidentiality stamps. Papers that weren't in her resume because someone, at some point, had wanted to bury them in oblivion. But Grant kept digging. He walked alone through the mansion's library, a vast room with dark wood shelves and the scent of aged leather. He was barefoot, stepping on the pale carpet, while the light from a golden lamp cast shadows over the framed portraits of Whitman ancestors hanging on the walls. His eyes stayed fixed on the iPad. With every swipe of his finger, Sienna's past appeared like an open wound no one had wanted to treat. Degree in pediatric nursing. Top marks in her class. Volunteer in community shelters, focusing on orphan children and teenage mothers. And then, a dry, cruel stamp. Terminated for medical negligence. Grant swallowed hard. He clicked on the next file, his fingers trembling. It was a police report. Objective, cold, almost inhuman. Name of baby, Elijah James. Age, 11 months. Cause of death, acute respiratory failure. Location, Oakland Memorial Hospital. Date, May 12, 2023. Grant braced both hands on the edge of the oak desk. His whole body tensed as if he had taken a punch to the stomach. At the bottom of the medical record, in small letters with slightly shaky handwriting, a handwritten note. Read. Mother reported requesting help from the on-call staff 4 times before the cardiac arrest. No protocol was activated. He read it and read it again and again, as if his mind refused to accept what his eyes were screaming so. Clearly, Sienna had begged for help, and no one came. Further down, attached to the administrative case, were photos. Sienna, wearing a wrinkled white lab coat, her badge hanging from her chest, eyes swollen from crying, holding her lifeless son in her arms during a solitary protest in front of the hospital. Behind her, red hand-painted signs read, "My son died waiting to be heard. It wasn't negligence. It was silence. I wasn't fired. I was silenced." Grant collapsed into his father's old armchair, the same one where so many important speeches had been planned. But he could no longer think in numbers. He rubbed his face, fingers pressing against his closed eyes. And all he could remember was the night Oliver had fallen asleep for the first time in Sienna's arms. That almost sacred peace, as if the baby had recognized a kind of pain only grieving mothers know how to carry and respect even without understanding. Hours later, Grant went out alone for the first time in days. He traded his suit for a simple jacket, left the driver at home, drove through the light rain, crossing San Francisco into East Oakland. He ignored the paparazzi flashes. Along the way, headlines didn't matter now. He parked in front of an old building, its facade faded, with a small, unkempt garden. On the door, a hand-painted wooden sign read, "Elijah Community Center." Grant knocked. The sound echoed inside as if it were calling up old memories. A woman with curly hair tied up in a floral scarf opened the door. Her eyes were sharp yet warm, but she was surprised. "You're Grant Whitman?" He nodded, pulling back the wet hood from his head. "Yes, I came to ask about Sienna James. Please, it's important." She hesitated, then pointed toward a cardboard box in the corner of the room, surrounded by donated toys. "She gave all this when she left. Asked me to keep it, in case someone ever wanted to know who she really was." Grant knelt before the box carefully, as if opening a time capsule. Inside were handwritten letters, many, on yellowed paper. Old photographs with mothers smiling beside Sienna. Children's drawings in crayon with phrases like "Thank you for taking care of my mommy." And at the bottom, almost hidden, a small, precisely folded envelope. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside, a note written in delicate yet firm handwriting. What was taken from me taught me to hear what is not said. That's why, even in silence, I recognized your son's cry. Maybe, someday, you'll understand. Across town, Sienna walked alone along a damp sidewalk. Streetlights reflected in the uneven puddles on the asphalt. She carried the same worn bag as always. She stopped in front of a closed shop window. In the glass reflection, she saw her own face, stronger, yet still marked. She raised her hand and touched the golden cross necklace at her neck. Softly she murmured, "You brought me here, Elijah. Now show me if I'm meant to stay." The phone vibrated in her pocket. She hesitated. It was an unknown number. She answered, her voice unsteady. "Sienna?" The voice on the other end was deep, familiar, but different, more human, more broken. "It's Grant." She froze on the sidewalk as if the world had stopped for a moment. "I need to see you." The call was still echoing in her mind when she reached the entrance of the Whitman mansion later that gray afternoon. The same gate that had expelled her with coldness now opened slowly, but there were no welcomes, no smiles. Only a security guard in a dark suit, eyes lowered, like a man following orders he didn't like. "I've been told to escort you straight to the boardroom. Don't stop, don't speak to anyone." Sienna nodded silently, clutching her bag to her body and tucking the golden cross necklace beneath her uniform. As she entered the main hall of the mansion's business wing, she felt the heavy air, the formal atmosphere. The oval oak table was surrounded by men and women in suits, all with flawless posture, open folders, and judgmental eyes. At the center of the table, Eleanor Whitman, in a cream suit and a pearly silk scarf at her neck, rose to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice polished but icy. "As you all know, the Whitman Foundation has, for decades, maintained an unwavering commitment to ethics, public image, and moral integrity." She turned, looking at Sienna as one might study a crack in an expensive painting. "Unfortunately, recent events have placed us in a delicate situation. A domestic level employee, hired for cleaning, overstepped her role and entered an intimate space. This action was caught on video, went viral, and now threatens to tarnish the name of an entire family." Grant sat at the back silent, his head lowered, his jaw tense. Eleanor went on. "No matter how noble your intentions may have been, Miss James, the fact is, you placed yourself above boundaries. And in this house, that has consequences. The Foundation's reputation is at stake. Therefore, I formally propose your immediate dismissal." Sienna took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on Eleanor. "I understand I don't belong here. I never did. But your grandson chose me. Not your security guards, not your nannies. Me. Because maybe, deep down, all he needed was something no amount of money can buy." One of the board members cleared his throat. Another exchanged an uneasy glance with the colleague beside him. But Eleanor struck the table with her palm in a gesture of forced elegance. "Your speech is touching, but this decision is final." Two security guards stepped toward Sienna. One of them, visibly uneasy, held out his hand. "Please, ma'am. I need you to come with me." Upstairs, Oliver, in the arms of a new nurse, began to fidget, as if something in the air had shifted, as if he sensed the emptiness of someone being pulled from the place where they had belonged. As they descended the first flight of stairs, Sienna looked up. The baby's eyes met hers. For a second, silence. And then, the scream. A sharp, desperate cry, like that of a wounded animal. "No, no, no. He's going into crisis." The nurse shouted. "It's just a tantrum," one of the onlookers muttered. But then came the spasms, the pale skin, the faltering breath. The baby arched his body, thrashing. "Call the doctor, quickly. Get the inhaler. Why is he reacting like this?" Grant rushed to his son and tried to hold him. "Oliver, son, look at me, look at me." But nothing worked. Not medication, not commands, not the electronic toys that once distracted him for minutes. He just screamed, that small body trembling in absolute panic. And then Sienna, already at the door, dropped her bag and ran back. "Let me through." One of the guards tried to block her, but Grant shouted, "Let her, now." Sienna knelt beside the baby, her hands open. The nurse handed him over without protest. The instant Oliver touched her chest, the crying stopped. His breathing was ragged, but softer. He tucked his shoulders in, closed his eyes, and slept. In the next room, the board members watched the scene in silence. Eleanor, standing still, looked as if she had been carved from ice. Sienna, with the baby in her arms, met Grant's eyes. You can fire an employee, but you can't break a bond born from pain. The hall was steeped in a silence louder than any words. The dark wood-paneled walls, once the backdrop for strategic decisions and calculated speeches, now stood as witnesses to a scene no one expected to see there. Sienna stayed kneeling on the thick, light wool carpet, Oliver asleep in her arms, his little face still damp with tears but finally at peace. The boy's soft breathing and the warmth radiating from his small body contrasted with the dense air. In the room, the silence wasn't awkward, it was reverent. The scene was no longer one of scandal, it was one of surrender. Of raw, undeniable truth that escaped the rules, the titles, the hierarchy. The board members, in their crisp suits and neatly arranged folders, exchanged uneasy glances as if the arguments prepared for this meeting no longer mattered. The nurse, who moments earlier had been trying to keep the baby quiet by force, now stood silently, arms crossed in front of her. There was a sudden humility in her gaze, as if she understood she hadn't lost her place because of incompetence, but because of the absence of affection. Eleanor, standing at the head of the boardroom table, rigid as a porcelain statue, kept her chin raised, her shoulders squared with the discipline of tradition. But her eyes no longer held the same control as before. They blinked. Once, wavered. Grant stood slowly. There was no rush in his movement, only resolve. His voice came firm but heavy with emotion, as if every word rose from his chest instead of his mind. I grew up believing that love was something you bought with good contracts, good schools, and good scandals swept under the rug. He paused, looked around, meeting the eyes of each board member and director at the table, men and women who had built empires on reputation and appearance. But my son didn't sleep with the best technology, or the most expensive doctors, or the key medicine we prescribe as if it solves everything. He only slept when he felt real love. There were quiet coughs, nervous whispers, but no one dared interrupt. Grant walked to the center of the hall with determined steps. He stopped beside Sienna, who still held Oliver as if he were made of blown glass. With that mix of strength and tenderness only a woman marked by loss could know. She is not a risk to this house. He paused briefly, looking silently at the baby. She is the only person here who has cared for my son with her heart. Then he turned, his gaze locked on Eleanor, not as her son, but as a man. And that's why, as of today, Sienna James is officially hired as Oliver's primary caregiver, with full rights, with recognition, and with respect. Eleanor pressed her lips together as if trying to hold back something stronger than Eleanor. Reason. You're making this decision based on emotion, not reason. Grant stepped toward her slowly, his face calm but resolute. His voice came in a whisper heavy with weight. Maybe for the first time in my life, Mother, I'm acting as a father. The board members were stunned. Some rose quietly, as if realizing there was no argument left to make. Others stayed still, simply watching, as if something much greater was being decided, not a position, but a value. Outside the mansion, the gates were surrounded. Reporters gathered quickly, microphones raised, cameras broadcasting live. The images of the baby's crisis, captured by staff and shared online, had already spread through sensationalist channels, parenting blogs, and social media. Public opinion was divided, hungry for an official statement. And it came. Grant stepped into the front garden, sleeves rolled up, tie loose at his neck. The light wind stirred the trees as he faced the flashes. My name is Grant Whitman. I'm a father. And I want to say that the woman you judged, exposed, and called a threat saved my son, not just with milk, but with presence, with soul, and with the love that no uniformed nanny was able to give. Across the street, some people applauded in respectful silence. Others filmed with phones in steady hands. But in the crowd, an elderly black woman, with a floral scarf covering her gray hair, lifted her hand to the sky and whispered as if in prayer. She changed the game. Inside, Sienna was back in Oliver's room, now reopened to her like a restored sanctuary. The space felt different, brighter, more alive, as if the air itself had changed. She stroked the baby's cheek with her fingertips, whispering with a trembling voice, "You saved me too, my angel. I thought I didn't know how to love anymore." In the hallway, Eleanor watched everything through a crack in the door, still, her shoulders straight, but her pride was fighting to hold on. And for the first time, in her eyes, something seemed to falter. The impact of Grant's decision spread further than anyone had predicted. News sites, social media accounts, medical journals, even community leaders began commenting on the billionaire's public acknowledgement of a woman made invisible by the system. But for Grant, it still wasn't enough. Sienna's name still bore a deep scar, the hospital record accusing her of negligence. That same week, he gathered his personal lawyers in the conference room. "I want the truth, all of it. And I want the world to know." The most experienced among them, a man in a dark gray suit with a pragmatic gaze, hesitated. "Mr. Whitman, we're talking about a powerful institution. Oakland Memorial has decades of legal protection. They won't admit fault easily." Grant didn't blink. "So we forced the door. I'm not afraid of any hospital. The ones who lost were her and her son." 3 days later, the paperwork was filed. The Whitman family's influence carried weight. Emails were answered in record time. And soon, an internal investigation was reopened at Memorial, now with journalists watching, civil rights groups applying pressure, and an outside audit team demanding transparency. The recordings from the night Elijah, Sienna's son, had been brought to the ER resurfaced, and with them, the hidden truths. Footage showed Sienna at the reception desk, in tears, the boy unconscious in her arms, begging for care. "Please. He's having trouble breathing. He needs oxygen now." The receptionist, with a bored expression, told her to wait. "Sign the forms first, ma'am." A digital clock in the corner of the video marked the passing time. 7 minutes. Then 11. 15. Elijah was only taken into the emergency room 17 minutes after arrival. By the time the doctor came in, it was too late. Sienna never knew there had been cameras recording everything. They told her the system had been down that night, an institutional lie, a cover-up. But now, with the pressure from the media and the courts, there was no way to hide it anymore. 2 weeks later, the hospital's leadership called a press conference. Grant was invited to attend. Sienna, sitting in the front row in a simple blue dress with her hair neatly tied back, held a white handkerchief between her fingers. Oliver slept in her lap. On stage, the institution's new ethics director, his expression tense, read the official statement. After a full review of the records, statements, and internal footage, we confirm that Ms. Sienna James did not commit medical negligence. On the contrary, she did everything in her power to save her son. A murmur swept through the room. He continued. The omission and unpreparedness were in fact on the part of members of our own staff who have now been dismissed. On behalf of Oakland Memorial Hospital, we publicly apologize to Ms. James and her family. Her name will be immediately cleared in all national records, and she will be compensated for the moral and material damages suffered. Sienna's eyes filled, but no tear fell yet. Grant looked at her without speaking, just steady, present. At the end of the conference, a reporter approached her. Ms. James, is there anything you'd like to say to the public? Sienna drew a deep breath. I just want to say that the pain they took from me will never leave. But today I can breathe without guilt. My son didn't die because I failed. He died because no one wanted to listen. She gripped the handkerchief, closed her eyes, and for the first time since this story began, she cried. But it wasn't a cry of pain. It was relief. It was as if, after so much struggle, her soul had finally been given permission to rest. At the back of the room, an older black woman with braided hair and tear-filled eyes whispered to herself, "Today, justice wore the right skin." After the press conference, the city fell quiet. For the first time, the name Sienna James wasn't followed by accusations, but by admiration. Women who had never been heard before began sending letters. Single mothers, nursing professionals, black women from all over the country said the same thing. You spoke for all of us. But it was in the quiet of daily life that things truly began to bloom. The days that followed were marked by a calm the Whitman mansion had never known. Baby Oliver smiled often, slept without crying, got sick less, crawled through the garden, as if discovering the world for the first time, with Sienna always close. Grant watched it all with different eyes. He, who once hid behind meetings, contracts, and cold screens, now walked barefoot through the house, listening to the children's music coming from his son's room. Sometimes he stopped at the doorway, unseen, just to hear Sienna's soft voice singing as she rocked the boy, "Sleep, my angel. Here no one will take you from me." One golden afternoon, Sienna was preparing the crib when Grant approached slowly, a small smile on his face. "Have you noticed how he follows you with his eyes?" he asked. Sienna smiled without turning. "Maybe he's teaching me what it is to be seen." They looked at each other for a second longer than necessary. Over time, the mansion spaces began to change. Grant transformed one of the old salons, once reserved for corporate dinners, into a support center for grieving mothers and healthcare professionals failed by the system. Sienna ran it all with the lightness of someone who carried scars, but not bitterness. Every Saturday, women from different walks of life gathered there to share experiences, to learn, to cry, and to start again. "You don't need to be perfect to be enough," Sienna told them. "I learned that in the arms of a baby who wasn't mine, but gave me my life back." Grant watched the talks from a distance, leaning in the doorway as if knowing this was no longer just a project. It was taking root. One rainy October night, Sienna was in the kitchen, wearing an apron, making tea for one of the mothers who had stayed after the meeting. Her curls, damp from the drizzle, framed her face as she hummed softly. Distracted, Grant came in quietly. He stood still for a moment, then cleared his throat. "Is everything okay?" she asked. He hesitated, then gave a half smile. "There's something I've wanted to ask for weeks, but I kept waiting for the right moment." Sienna wiped her hands on the apron. Her heart skipped. Grant took a deep breath. "Would you have dinner with me? But not in the boardroom, not in the garden. Just the two of us. No titles, no business. Just me and you." Sienna lowered her eyes, surprised, then looked at him. Dark brown eyes, deep, steady. "You want to have dinner with a woman who used to clean your floors?" "No," he replied. "I want to have dinner with the woman who saved my son and taught me what it means to love with truth." She smiled, a small, restrained smile, but with tears in her eyes. Then, yes. Upstairs, Oliver, already in his crib, began murmuring as if he knew something new had begun downstairs. Grant held out his hand and Sienna took it, not as an employee, not as a caregiver, but as herself. And for the first time, the Whitman mansion didn't feel like a gilded cage. It felt like home. 5 years had passed since the night Grant had reached out to Sienna in the mansion's kitchen. Life had changed quietly, like a tree growing, strong while no one is looking. The pain had not been forgotten, but transformed into fertile ground. And on that special day, the entire country was about to hear this story, told by the person who had lived every line of it with her heart. The auditorium was wide, with soft lighting and a full audience. National TV cameras were positioned at every angle. The event celebrated female leaders who had turned pain into service, and among the honorees was her, Sienna James. On stage, a large screen projected old images, news clippings, excerpts from the past press conference, photos of the community center founded in the East Wing of the Whitman Mansion. When Sienna walked onto the stage, she wore a simple wine-colored dress and a gold cross necklace over her chest. Her curly hair was loose, the same curls that had once been deemed inappropriate for moving among the elite. But now, no one dared to say she didn't belong there. Beside her, Oliver, now 5, held her hand tightly. His big, bright eyes scanned the audience as if he, too, understood the weight of that journey. Sienna took the microphone calmly. Her voice came out low, steady, and within seconds, the world stopped to listen. For a long time, I was told I was just a maid, that my place was in the corner, in silence. That love only had value if it came with the right badge, the right last name. She paused briefly, taking a deep breath. But my son taught me. And later, Oliver reminded me, there is no small role when you act with love. I was a maid. I was judged. I was invisible. But I was a mother. Even when no one called me that. An absolute silence filled the room. Grant, seated in the front row, fought back tears. Oliver, his face pressed to her arm, whispered, "Mommy, you're huge." Sienna smiled tenderly and stroked his head. That's when, unexpectedly, Eleanor Whitman rose from among the guests. Dressed in white, her hair now completely silver, she walked slowly to the stage with something small in her hands. Everyone's eyes followed her. Surprise, respect, a touch of disbelief. When she reached Sienna, she took from her pocket an antique gold brooch with a blue stone in the center. This brooch has been in our family for 3 generations. It belonged to my husband's mother. It has never been given to anyone outside the bloodline. She extended the object with trembling hands. But today I understand that blood ties are not always the strongest. Sienna's eyes widened. She hesitated. Mrs. Eleanor. The matriarch's voice wavered. For the first time, there was tenderness there. You saved more than my grandson, Sienna. You saved our humanity. Sienna took the brooch in both hands, and she cried. This time, it wasn't pain, nor relief. It was wholeness. The audience rose in unison. Applause, tears, stifled cries of support. Grant stepped toward the stage. He held out his hand to her again, now as a husband, not as an employer, nor as a man in debt. She accepted. Oliver raised both arms high as if he knew his family was complete. On the screen in the auditorium, Sienna's final words appeared in golden letters. Love is not a position, it's a choice. And I chose, even when the world denied me that right. And now tell me, what did you think of this story? Leave a comment with your rating from 0 to 10. I really want to know how much this story touched you. If you liked it, hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. And before you go, I've picked out another moving story that will touch your heart even more. Just click on the screen. I'll be waiting for you there.